Thermoregulation is a process to maintain core body temperature at a specific set point, which differ depending on the species. An organism's bodily function is a result of physical and chemical processes that are sensitive to change in temperature. For this reason, thermoregulation is an important process to allow day-to-day bodily process to function at the best possible condition. Animals can be divided into two categories, which are endotherm and ectotherm. Endotherm include birds and mammals. They use metabolic heat to maintain their core body temperature, while ectotherm include reptiles depend on temperatures of environment to regulate their body temperature. In this video, the mechanism of thermoregulation in birds, mammals, and reptiles will be discussed, as well as thermoregulation during fever, specifically for mammals.
Starting from this slide, you will enter the world of birds. Birds, or aves, are warm-blooded creatures with wings and feathers. Their temperature is higher than humans Homo sapiens, thus they feel warm to our touch. Unlike others, they are the only genus that don't have sweat gland. A research found that birds living in hot climates have bigger beaks than the ones living in cold climate. Try to compare a toucan that lives in a hot climate and a sparrowbill that lives in a colder one. As you guys can see in the picture captured by a thermal camera, the heat is more focused on the beaks. Other than that, what are the ways for them to keep cool in the summer and keep warm in the winter? Let's talk about how birds keep cool in hot environment. Evaporative cooling, vascularized pouch, behavioral thermoregulation, and excrete on feed are among of the ways to do that. As water evaporates from a surface, it cools that surface. This is evaporative cooling. It is a primary method for cooling down a hot bird. A hot owl will flap the loose skin under its throat to move air over its mouth cavity. This is called gular fluttering. It will produce very little heat but is an energy-efficient movement. Vultures also use evaporative cooling. It will urinate on its leg if the daytime temperatures are over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The urine will evaporate and at the same time cooling the legs and drawing more heat from the body of hot vulture. Pelicans, when they are hot, they hold their bills slightly open and rapidly vibrating their gular pouches. This is also called gular fluttering but using their vascularized pouches. The tissue making up the gular sac was somewhat transparent and in the strong light it can be seen as highly vascularized. The blood vessels appeared as dark streaks in clear surroundings. Next, birds also experience behavioral thermoregulation, such as sunning or standing in the water. One example is gulls. They will rotate 180 degrees to constantly face the sun on a hot, windless day. The surface area exposed to direct sunlight are their most reflective plumage: white, head, neck, and breast. This minimizes the amount of heat gained into their body. Gulls use their unfeathered legs and feet to stand in the water and prevent overheating. The interesting fact is, gull chicks lack thermoregulatory ability until they are several days old and more prone to overheating. So, the parents provide the sheet for them to stand under. Eurohydrosis is an unhygienic heat relief done by birds as they excrete on their own feet. For instance, marabou storks have large beaks and skinny legs to prop themselves up to 5 feet tall. These birds live in swampy wetlands and dry hot weather of the southern Africa. When the weather is hot, they will poop and it is mixed with pee before expelled out of cloaca, resulting in a lot of runny liquid covering the legs. The liquid evaporates and will cool the bird's legs. The residue is white powdery solids which then reflect the sunlight from their feet. In cooler weather, birds have their own unique ways to keep warm. Standing on one leg, stucking the legs and beaks inside the feathers, counter current exchange system, fluffing their feathers, and regulated hypothermia are among their ways.
Behavior plays a significant role in reducing the amount of heat loss from unfeathered surface. By standing on one leg and tucking the other among its breast feathers, the birds can reduce half the amount of unfeathered limb exposed. They also tuck their beaks among the feathers while standing on one leg or sitting. Birds such as owls and cockatoo fluff up their feathers to further insulate their bodies by the thickening of the coat. This is because feathers can trap a layer of air next to the body to reduce heat loss from the skin. Do you guys know what is regulated hypothermia? It is actually a condition where the birds maintain a body temperature at a lower level during periods of inactivity or response to food deprivation. Hummingbirds, swifts, and poor wills enter a state of torpor in which body temperature may drop as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours during the night or for days during extremely cold weather. However, they face increased danger of predation because they are unable to respond quickly. Countercurrent heat exchange system is when the arteries and veins in the legs lie in contact with each other, in which heat flows from the warmer to cooler blood to reduce heat loss. From the bird's core or trunk, arterial blood flows at body temperature while venous blood in the bird's foot is cool. As the cool blood returns towards the core, heat moves by conductance from warm arteries into the cool veins. Thus, arterial blood reaching the feet is already cool and venous blood reaching the core has already been warmed.
Reptiles are ectothermic animals, which is to say they produce very little metabolic heat and their body temperature depends essentially on the environment. Variations of reptiles have different preferred temperature to survive optimally. Relatively elevated temperature, only then they can accomplish their main function, which are locomotion, feeding, and reproduction. Snake and lizard have dry skin, which reduce heat loss of body by evaporation. They have expandable ribcage, which allow more efficient ventilation for heat exchange. So, they regulate heat by behavior. For example, we seek for one place, orienting themselves toward heat source to increase heat intake and increase body surface exposed to the heat. The other example is lizard. They have the ability to change their skin color to manipulate their heat intake.
In extreme hot conditions, reptiles like crocodiles and alligators open their mouth, which is also known as mouth gaping, is similar to panting. Gaping reduced the rate of heat gain by the head of small and large alligators when these animals were exposed to high light radiation loads at moderate air temperature, while the body continues to heat up. The magnitude of this effect increased with size. Gaping had little effect on body temperature and did not reduce the final equilibrium temperature of the head. This mouth gaping posture, however, is also a behavioral display used even at night or when it is raining. A recent experiment on caiman crocodiles indicated that this behavior had no thermoregulatory significance. Alligators are cold-blooded, which means when it gets cold, they slow down. Their winters are devoted to staying as warm as possible. As temperature cools, alligators' metabolism slows and they begin a process known as brumation. Below 70 degrees Fahrenheit or so, they stop feeding, and when it gets much colder, alligators dig out a den in the bank of the pond or river and go dormant until it warms up again. Alligators can even survive freezing conditions. Turtle is diurnal along with tortoise, bearded dragon, iguanas, and chameleon, which means animals that are active during the day. Turtles are thought to possess counter-current heat exchangers in both the anterior and posterior flippers, have thick layers of adipose tissue surrounding cranial structures, including the esophagus to prevent heat loss from the animal's head, and have peripheral layers of fat which include deposits of brown adipose tissue. This system has the ability to retain more than 90% of heat at the core of the animal, decreasing the heat loss through the exposed extremities. Because they are so large, leatherback sea turtles have low surface area to volume ratio, thus the core temperature of the turtle changes at a much slower rate. This phenomenon is called gigantothermy. No other reptile actively tolerates such a wide range of temperature conditions. I say actively because there are reptiles that tolerate below freezing temperatures but do so in a hibernating state. When in high temperature waters, just the opposite occurs. Leatherback sea turtles are so successful at regulating their body temperature that they have the ability to maintain constant body temperature 18 degrees above or below the ambient temperature. However, the leatherback turtle maintaining its temperature is not only depends on the rate of heat loss, but also on the rate of heat production. The gender of their offspring is determined by temperature too, in which the male is below 27.7 degrees Celsius and for female is above 31 degrees Celsius.
Moving on, we are going to talk about mammals. Mammals have their own ways to regulate their body temperature called thermoregulation. Some examples of mammals are cats, dogs, and even dolphins. Blood is a good conductor of heat. Thus, mammals are able to radiate heat from the blood vessels or conserve it by the process of vasodilation and vasoconstrictions of the arterioles respectively. For an example, when it's hot or when the body temperature increases, the thermoreceptor in the skin detect the changes. Thus, the information is sent to the anterior hypothalamus by the neuron, then giving out a signal to the arterioles to dilate, meaning that the blood vessels expand to release heat from the skin. This is called vasodilation, thus keeping our pets happy. Another way mammals regulate their body temperature is by sweating. Sweating can cool mammals down due to the evaporative cooling effect. To simplify, water absorbs heat when it evaporates.
Surprisingly, not all mammals have true sweat glands called the apocrine glands. Pigs and rhinos, for instance, only have a few sweat glands. Instead, they roll themselves in mud to cool down that double up as a protection from the sun and parasites. Dogs also lack of sweat glands. They can only sweat through their paws and nose. Therefore, they tend to pant to cool down. The surface of the respiratory tract is wet, and the evaporation that occurs as the cool air passes enhances the heat loss. Additionally, the tongue has an abundant network of blood vessels, allowing more heat to be radiated. As for when it's cold or the body temperature drops, the thermoreceptor detects the changes and sends impulse to the posterior hypothalamus. Signals are sent to the blood vessels. Then, vasoconstriction occurs as a result, reducing the amount of heat loss to the environment, keeping our Arctic fox happily playing in the snow. Some animals living in the cold regions, such as the Arctic fox, also have a vertebrae in their extremities, which is a complex network of arteries and veins lying very close to each other. The metabolic activity might as well increase to produce heat. But some animals can adapt to the change of environment, might as well just shiver, which is the contraction of the skeletal muscles, thus generating heat.
Additionally, some mammals have their own unique way to regulate their body temperature when it is cold. During dives, Dolphins' blood circulation is reduced at the outer portions of the body and concentrated into the animal's core organs and tissues. Body heat is conserved by transferring it from one blood vessel to another during circulation instead of being released to the environment.
Just now, we get to know how animals regulate their body temperature. But how about mammals have fever? Let's dive in. Fever or pyrexia is when the body temperature increases from the normal range and often accompanies infectious diseases. The higher temperature is to activate and increase the concentration of lymphocyte in lymphoid organs. The induction of fever begins with the production of pyrogens, which includes interleukin-1, interleukin-6, macrophage inflammatory protein, etc. In addition, prostaglandins or PGS are produced by the endothelial cells. When released into the blood, pyrogens and PGS reach the organa vasculosum of the lamina terminalis of the hypothalamus, in which the blood-brain barrier here is almost non-existent. Pyrogens in hypothalamus then later stimulate the endothelial cells to produce additional prostaglandins E2. This PGS causes the set point to increase. Consequently, mammals will initiate response to conserve and produce heat either by shivering, piloerection, huddling behavior and vasoconstriction, especially at the extremities. Mammals will maintain the temperature at the new set point until the pyrogen is metabolized. Then, the set point decreases back to normal. Mammals will initiate heat loss mechanisms such as vasodilation and sweating to increase body temperature.